St. Regis Hotel hummed with the soft murmur of ambition and opulence, a symphony of hushed conversations, clinking champagne flutes, and the occasional burst of appreciative applause. Damon Stone, a man carved from sharp angles and an unyielding will, stood at the periphery, a dark, imposing silhouette amidst the dazzling array of society's elite. His gaze, colder than the ice shimmering in his untouched whiskey glass, swept over the crowd, dismissing the meaningless chatter, the superficial smiles, and the fleeting displays of inherited wealth. He was here for one purpose, and one purpose only. Years had passed, but the bitter taste of ruin still clung to Damon's memory like ash. The Stone Empire, once a titan in the manufacturing world, had crumbled, reduced to dust by a ruthless corporate takeover, orchestrated by one man, Victor Cruz. The name, a venomous whisper in Damon's mind, fueled the inferno of resentment that had burned within him for over a decade. His family, once proud and unshakable, had been left shattered, their legacy irrevocably tainted, their future uncertain. Damon, a mere boy then, had watched his father, a man of immense integrity and unwavering principle, break under the relentless assault. He had vowed, in the quiet, desperate hours of the night, that he would reclaim what was lost and make Victor Cruz pay for every tear, every sacrifice, every shattered dream. Now, Damon was a billionaire, a titan in the technology sector. His empire built not on inherited privilege, but on raw intellect, relentless innovation, and an almost superhuman drive. He had clawed his way back from the brink, transforming the ashes of his family's defeat into a formidable fortress of wealth and power. And tonight, at this high-profile charity auction, raising funds for underprivileged schools, the universe, in its ironic cruelty, had presented him with the perfect opportunity for his long-awaited retribution. His eyes, sharp and predatory, landed on her. Isabella Cruz. She moved through the crowd with an ethereal grace, a vibrant splash of color in a pale blue silk gown, her dark hair cascading in soft waves around her shoulders. She was breathtaking, undeniably beautiful, a stark contrast to the dark storm brewing within him. He had seen her photographs in society pages, heard whispers of her charity work, her quiet philanthropic efforts, always in the shadow of her notoriously powerful father. Damon had dismissed her as a pampered heiress, a product of her father's ill-gotten gains, utterly blind to the suffering her family had inflicted. But now, seeing her in person, a flicker of something unreadable, something almost vulnerable, crossed her features as she spoke animatedly with a group of admiring patrons. He pushed the thought aside. She was Victor Cruz's daughter. That was all that mattered. The auctioneer's voice, booming and theatrical, cut through the din, drawing everyone's attention to the brightly lit stage. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for our final, most exclusive item of the evening, the auctioneer announced, his voice dripping with anticipation. A truly unparalleled experience. An exclusive, all-expenses-paid weekend getaway to a private, secluded island resort in the Maldives, complete with a dedicated concierge service, a personal chef, and, of course, the delightful company of our esteemed host, Miss Isabella Cruz herself. All proceeds, naturally, going to the noble cause of underprivileged education. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, followed by a flurry of excited murmurs. A weekend with Isabella Cruz. It was an unprecedented offering. A bold move designed to generate maximum bids for a cause she evidently championed with sincere passion. Damon's lips curved into a cold, predatory smile. This was it, the perfect stage for his carefully orchestrated revenge. Bidding began immediately, a rapid-fire exchange of escalating numbers. Faces, flushed with desire and competitive fervor, eagerly raised their paddles. Damon waited, allowing the initial frenzy to subside, his gaze fixed on Isabella, who stood gracefully by the stage, a nervous flush on her cheeks. When the bids began to slow, reaching what seemed to be their peak, Damon raised his paddle, his voice cutting through the hushed silence, clear and resonant. 10 million. A stunned silence descended upon the ballroom, so profound it was almost deafening. All eyes turned to Damon, then to Isabella, who looked visibly startled, her eyes wide with surprise. 10 million. It was an astronomical sum for a weekend, even for this elite crowd. It was a statement, a declaration of overwhelming, unyielding intent. No one dared to bid against him. The auctioneer, momentarily flustered, quickly recovered, his voice booming with renewed enthusiasm. 10 million once. 10 million twice. Sold. To Mr. Damon Stone. A smattering of polite, slightly bewildered applause followed. Damon, ignoring the curious glances and whispered conjectures, began to walk towards the stage, his movements deliberate, unhurried. He saw Isabella's eyes meet his, a flicker of apprehension mixed with confusion in their depths. As he reached the stage, the auctioneer, beaming, extended a hand. Damon ignored it, his gaze locked on Isabella. "Mr. Stone," she began, her voice soft, yet remarkably steady despite her visible surprise. "Thank you. That's an incredibly generous donation." Her eyes, a striking shade of warm hazel, held a curious mixture of gratitude and subtle unease. "My pleasure, Miss Cruz," Damon replied, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, betraying none of the calculated malice churning within him. He allowed a fleeting, almost imperceptible smirk to touch his lips. "I assure you, this weekend will be memorable." The unspoken threat, the veiled promise of retribution, hung in the air between them, unseen by the admiring crowd, but keenly felt by Isabella. A shiver, subtle yet distinct, ran through her. She tried to smile, but it faltered at the edges, replaced by a lingering sense of disquiet. He had seen the shift, the faint flicker of unease, and a dark satisfaction settled in his core. The game, at last, had begun. Chapter 2. First impressions and unveiling layers. The private jet, a sleek marvel of modern engineering, cut silently through the azure sky, carrying Damon and Isabella towards the remote Maldivian resort. The cabin was a study in understated luxury, plush leather seats, polished wood, and the soft hum of the engines providing a serene backdrop to the unspoken tension that filled the air. Isabella sat across from Damon, outwardly composed, but her mind a whirlwind of questions and subtle apprehension. Damon, conversely, was a picture of serene control, his gaze occasionally drifting to her, observing her with a detached, almost scientific curiosity. He had expected a spoiled heiress, a woman accustomed to casual indulgence, perhaps even bored by it. He had envisioned her demanding, petulant, revealing the entitled arrogance he associated with her father's lineage. But Isabella was neither. She had greeted him at the private hangar with a private quiet grace. Her questions about their travel plans delivered with genuine consideration for his time. She carried a single, unassuming carry-on, a stark contrast to the mountains of luggage he had seen other wealthy socialites bring for far shorter trips. "Thank you again, Mr. Stone," Isabella said, breaking the silence, her voice soft yet clear. "Your generosity truly means a great deal to the schools. This will provide so many opportunities for children who desperately need them." Her hazel eyes, direct and sincere, met his. Damon offered a curt nod, his expression unreadable. "The cause is worthy, Miss Cruz." He kept his voice flat, devoid of emotion, unwilling to engage in pleasantries that might betray his true intentions. He wanted her to feel uncomfortable, to be constantly on edge. "Please, call me Isabella," she offered gently, a faint smile touching her lips. "And I feel I should call you Damon, given we'll be spending the weekend together." Damon's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He preferred the formality, the distance. "As you wish, Isabella." He allowed a slight pause, then added, his voice laced with a subtle challenge, "I hope you find the accommodations to your liking. I believe nothing but the best is suitable for a cruise." Isabella's smile faltered, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps hurt, perhaps resignation, crossing her face. "I assure you, Damon, any accommodation would be more than suitable. My primary concern is the success of the charity. The luxury is merely a byproduct." Her voice held no hint of defensiveness, only a quiet, almost melancholic sincerity. Damon frowned, a flicker of unease stirring within him. This wasn't the reaction he had anticipated. He had expected arrogance, a dismissal of his subtle sarcasm. Instead, he encountered a quiet humility. He watched her for a moment, then turned his gaze to the window, the vast expanse of blue reflecting his own internal turmoil. He reminded himself of Victor Cruz, of the cold, calculated destruction. This woman, regardless of her outward demeanor, was still his daughter. She was part of the problem. The island resort was a breathtaking paradise, a kaleidoscope of turquoise waters, pristine white sand, and lush, verdant foliage. The overwater villa, a masterpiece of architectural design, offered unparalleled views of the Indian Ocean, its glass floors revealing glimpses of vibrant marine life below. Isabella walked through the villa with a quiet awe, her eyes wide with genuine appreciation, not the jaded nonchalance he had expected. "It's stunning, Damon," she breathed, genuinely impressed. "Truly magnificent. You have impeccable taste." "I have the means to acquire it," Damon replied, his voice deliberately clipped, attempting to inject a dose of his usual cynicism. Isabella turned to him, a faint frown creasing her brow. "Is that all it is to you, Damon? Means? No appreciation for beauty simply for its own sake?" Her question was gentle, curious, devoid of judgment. His guard stiffened. He was here to break her, not to engage in philosophical debates about aesthetics. "Beauty is subjective," he stated, his voice flat. "Utility is quantifiable." Isabella regarded him for a long moment, a faint, almost pitying smile touching her lips. "Perhaps. But some things, Damon, are meant to be simply experienced, not quantified." She moved towards the sliding glass doors that led to a private plunge pool, the shimmering water reflecting the brilliant sunlight. Later that afternoon, a gentle breeze rustled through the palm trees as they sat on the expansive deck of the villa, a table laden with fresh fruit and exotic juices between them. Isabella, surprisingly, did not immediately launch into casual conversation, nor did she attempt to pry into his life. She seemed content to simply exist in the peaceful setting, occasionally gazing out at the endless expanse of the ocean. "So, what is it you do, Mr. Stone, when you're not single-handedly funding charity initiatives?" she asked, her voice light, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "I build things," Damon replied, his voice terse. "Technology. Empires." He offered a deliberately vague response, unwilling to share details of the empire he had painstakingly rebuilt. Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "And do you enjoy it? The building of empires, I mean? Does it bring you satisfaction?" The unexpected question caught him off guard. Satisfaction? He had always viewed his work as a means to an end, a relentless pursuit of power and wealth to achieve his ultimate goal, Victor Cruz's downfall. He had never considered joy or personal fulfillment. "It's necessary," he stated, deflecting. "Necessary for what?" she pressed, her hazel eyes holding a probing yet gentle curiosity. "For power? For validation?" He bristled, irritation beginning to simmer. She was too perceptive, too willing to look beneath the surface. "Some people simply pursue excellence, Isabella," he retorted, his voice sharper than he intended. She merely smiled, a knowing almost melancholic expression. Indeed, but one must be careful not to let the pursuit of excellence consume everything else. Life, I've found, is often richer in the quiet moments, the unplanned connections. Her words, so devoid of the arrogance he expected, so infused with an unexpected wisdom, resonated with a disturbing clarity. He found himself studying her, truly looking at her for the first time. Her face was open, expressive, free of the artifice he associated with her social set. There was a quiet strength in her gaze, a subtle melancholy beneath her composed demeanor. She wasn't a privileged brat. She was something far more complex, far more intriguing. And that, he realized with a chilling jolt, complicated everything. His cold resolve, honed over years of bitter resentment, was beginning to feel a faint, almost imperceptible crack. The carefully constructed walls of his revenge plan were showing their first signs of strain. Chapter 3. Unforeseen Connections. The days on the private island unfolded with a surprising, almost unnerving rhythm. Damon had anticipated a weekend of forced pleasantries, of enduring the superficiality of a woman he intended to break. Instead, he found himself increasingly captivated by Isabella's quiet grace, her unassuming intelligence, and a genuine warmth that seemed to radiate from her, slowly thawing the icy fortress around his heart. They took long walks on the pristine beaches, the fine white sand soft beneath their bare feet. Isabella spoke passionately about the importance of education, sharing anecdotes about the children she had met through her charity work, her eyes lighting up with genuine excitement. She spoke of her dreams for a more equitable future, her voice devoid of any pretense or self-congratulation. She listened intently when he, surprisingly, found himself sharing brief, almost accidental glimpses into his own world, the complexities of his tech ventures, the challenges of innovation. He heard himself explaining concepts, processes, even frustrations, things he rarely discussed with anyone, least of all a woman he intended to destroy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, they sat on the beach, the gentle lapping of the waves a soothing backdrop. Isabella had been sketching in a small notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. She turned to him, holding out the sketch pad. It was a remarkably detailed, almost hauntingly beautiful charcoal drawing of the old, crumbling schoolhouse that the charity was working to rebuild. The dilapidated structure, in her art, held a quiet dignity, a silent plea for renewal. "It captures its spirit, doesn't it?" she mused, her gaze fixed on the drawing. "The hope, the potential, despite the decay." Damon found himself staring at the sketch, a strange pang in his chest. It reminded him, uncannily, of the brokenness of his own childhood home after his family's ruin. He saw the resilience, the quiet strength in her lines, in her shading. "You're very talented," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. It was the first genuine compliment he had offered her. Isabella smiled, a genuine, unforced expression that transformed her face. "Thank you. It's a quiet passion. My father, he always wanted me to pursue something more substantial. Something in business, perhaps. But art, it's where I find my solace." Her voice held a faint undertone of melancholy, a subtle hint of a life lived under the immense pressure of external expectations. A new layer began to unfold before him. Isabella wasn't just a privileged heiress. She was a woman living in the shadow of her powerful, domineering father, much as Damon himself had lived in the shadow of his family's ruined legacy. He saw a quiet rebellion in her artistic pursuits, a gentle defiance in her dedication to causes her father likely saw as trivial. The initial image of a pampered brat, a caricature of her father's wealth, began to dissolve, replaced by a complex, nuanced portrait of a woman who seemed genuinely kind, passionately empathetic, and surprisingly emprundas, vulnerable. He found himself wanting to know more, to peel back the layers, to understand the motivations that truly drove her. He asked about her childhood, about her mother, about her relationship with Victor. Isabella spoke with a quiet candor, describing a childhood marked by her father's relentless ambition and often distant affection. Her mother, she revealed, had passed away years ago, a loss that still resonated in her quiet moments. Victor Cruz, she explained, was a man of immense drive, utterly focused on his business empire, often at the expense of personal connections. She spoke of him without bitterness, but with a faint, almost wistful longing for a different kind of parental love. Damon listened, a strange sense of empathy stirring within him, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to entertain for years. He saw echoes of his own past, the weight of a powerful, often distant father figure, albeit one consumed by a different kind of ambition. The more she revealed, the harder it became to reconcile the woman before him with the architect of his family's downfall. Could she truly be so innocent, so unaware of her father's ruthless actions? Or was this an elaborate act, a calculated performance to disarm him? His mind, accustomed to suspicion and strategic thinking, grappled with the cognitive dissonance. One evening, after a particularly engaging conversation about global warming and sustainable energy, a topic Isabella was surprisingly well versed in, Damon found himself laughing, a genuine, unrestrained sound that surprised even himself. Isabella's eyes, wide with a gentle amusement, twinkled in the soft lamplight. "You laugh rarely, Damon," she observed, her voice soft. "It suits you." He felt a flush rise to his cheeks, an unfamiliar warmth spreading through him. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "I've had little to laugh about," he stated, the bitter edge returning to his voice, a faint, almost imperceptible reminder of his past pain. Isabella's expression softened, a look of quiet understanding in her eyes. "I understand. Life can be cruel sometimes. But even in the deepest valleys, there are moments of light, if you allow yourself to see them." Her words, so simple, yet so profound, resonated deep within him. He had spent years wrapped in the darkness of his revenge, consumed by the shadows of the past. He had intentionally closed himself off to any light, any joy, believing it would dilute his resolve. But Isabella, with her quiet strength and gentle wisdom, was challenging that carefully constructed worldview. The cold resolve he had nurtured for so long, the unwavering hatred for the Cruz name, was beginning to feel less like a shield and more like a suffocating cage. He was falling, slowly, irrevocably, for the very woman he had intended to break. The thought sent a jolt of panic through him. This was not part of the plan. This was dangerous. This was jeopardizing everything. Chapter 4. The Tangle of Emotions. The last day on the island was bathed in the golden glow of a perfect sunrise. The air was soft, filled with the scent of salt and exotic blooms. Damon found himself sitting beside Isabella on the beach, watching the waves gently kiss the shore. The easy silence between them, once awkward, now felt comfortable, almost intimate. He had spent years meticulously planning this revenge, rehearsing every cutting remark, every devastating revelation. Now, the words felt like poison on his tongue, threatening to shatter something precious and fragile. He found himself looking at her, truly seeing her, beyond the veil of his preconceived notions. Her hair, caught by the gentle breeze, framed a face that was both strong and vulnerable. Her eyes, reflecting the dawn sky, held a quiet wisdom that belied her age. He saw no trace of the entitlement he had expected, no hint of the callousness he associated with her father. Only kindness, intelligence, and a deep, empathetic spirit. The thought of revealing the truth, of crushing that spirit, sent a sharp pang through his chest. He had come here to exact a painful retribution, to make her feel a fraction of the suffering his family had endured. But now, The idea of causing her pain, this Isabella, felt utterly wrong, a desecration of the fragile connection that had blossomed between them. He cleared his throat, the sound unusually loud in the serene morning quiet. "Isabella," he began, his voice rough, "there's something I need to tell you." Her gaze shifted to him, her expression open, curious. "Yes, Damon?" His mind raced, desperately searching for a way to explain, to soften the blow. But there was no easy way. The truth was a blunt instrument, designed for destruction. He looked away, focusing on the distant horizon, unable to meet her gaze. "This weekend, this auction, it wasn't just about charity for me." He heard her quiet intake of breath, a subtle shift in the air beside him. He felt the weight of her unspoken question, her growing apprehension. He took a deep, shaky breath, the salt-tinged air burning his lungs. "My family, the Stones," he continued, his voice low, imbued with years of suppressed pain. "We were once prominent in manufacturing, a long-standing legacy, until Victor Cruz orchestrated a hostile takeover. He destroyed everything. My father lost everything, his company, his reputation, health. Our family was utterly ruined." He felt her stiffen beside him. The comfortable silence had evaporated, replaced by a sudden, chilling tension. He finally turned to face her, his eyes, dark and unyielding, meeting her now wide, disbelieving gaze. "I spent years rebuilding, clawing my way back from the brink," he continued, the words tumbling out, raw and unvarnished. "Every step, every success, was fueled by one purpose: retribution. To make Victor Cruz pay for what he did. When you appeared at that auction, the daughter of the man who destroyed my family, I saw my chance. I bought this weekend with you for one reason, Isabella, for revenge." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, shattering the idyllic morning, shattering the fragile peace that had settled between them. Isabella's face drained of color, her eyes, wide with shock, slowly filling with a profound, agonizing hurt. She recoiled slightly, as if struck, her hand involuntarily pressing against her chest. "Revenge?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread of disbelief. You bought me for revenge?" The word "bought" seemed to echo, a brutal reminder of the transactional nature of their encounter. He saw the pain, raw and searing, in her eyes, and a fresh wave of self-loathing washed over him. He had intended to inflict suffering, to make her feel the humiliation he had endured. But now, witnessing her agony, the profound betrayal etched on her beautiful face, it felt like a dagger twisting in his own heart. "Isabella, He reached out, his hand hovering, wanting to comfort her, to explain, to somehow undo the devastating words he had just spoken. But she flinched, pulling back sharply, her eyes blazing with a fierce, unexpected anger. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice trembling, but imbued with a steely resolve he hadn't seen before. You deliberately sought me out? You pretended to care about the charity, about me?" Her voice rose, laced with a bitter accusation. "All this time, it was a lie? A calculated deception?" "At first, yes," Damon admitted, his voice rough, unable to lie to her now, even to spare her further pain. "I wanted to hurt him. Through you. I wanted to expose you, to humiliate you, to make you pay for his sins. I believed you were just like him, a product of his greed, oblivious to the destruction he caused." "And now?" she challenged, her voice trembling, but her gaze unwavering, demanding an answer. "What do you believe now, Damon? After spending time with me? After seeing me?" He looked at her, truly looked at the woman he had come to know, the woman who had somehow inexplicably, breached the impenetrable walls around his heart. The words, when they came, were raw, unbidden, tearing from the depths of his soul. I believe I made a terrible, unforgivable mistake. I realized, you're nothing like him. You're kind, you're passionate, you're genuinely good, and I fell in love with you, Isabella. Desperately, irrevocably. Irrevocably. The confession hung in the air, a fragile, desperate plea for understanding, for forgiveness. Isabella stared at him, her eyes wide, a mixture of profound shock, searing pain, and a flicker of something he couldn't quite decipher. The admission of love, born from the ashes of his vengeful plan, seemed to complicate everything further, twisting the knife of betrayal in her heart. "Love?" she repeated, her voice laced with a bitter, incredulous laugh, devoid of humor. "You expect me to believe that? After everything? After you manipulated me, used me as a pawn in your twisted game of revenge against my father, you think I can just forget that? Forget how you deliberately sought to hurt me?" Tears welled in her eyes, finally spilling over, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. "You had me fooled, Damon. I thought you were different. I thought you saw something in me, something beyond my father's name. I trusted you. And you," she choked, her voice breaking, "you utterly destroyed that trust. You're just as cruel, just as calculating as the man you claim to despise." She scrambled to her feet, her movements jerky, frantic. "I want to leave. Now. I want to go home. Get me off this island." Her voice was sharp, laced with an undeniable tremor of utter devastation. Damon rose, reaching for her, his heart twisting with unbearable anguish. "Isabella, please, let me explain. Let me try to make this right. I know I've hurt you, but I swear my feelings for you are real. They changed everything." She recoiled from his touch, her eyes blazing with a raw, almost feral pain. "There's nothing to explain, Damon. You bought me. For revenge. That's all I need to know. And the fact that you can now claim to love me, it only makes your betrayal even more sickening." She turned, her back rigid, her shoulders trembling, and walked swiftly away, leaving him standing alone on the beach. The pristine white sand now stained with the bitter ashes of his destroyed plans, and the profound, agonizing realization that he had not only lost his revenge, but potentially the only woman who had ever truly touched his cold, calculating heart. The silence that settled over the beach was no longer peaceful. It was a gaping chasm, an abyss of regret and despair. Chapter 5. The Aftermath and a Desperate Plea. The flight back to the city was a torturous descent into profound silence and agonizing regret. Isabella sat in the furthest corner of the jet, her face turned resolutely towards the window, her body rigid with unspoken anguish. Damon remained in his seat, unable to tear his gaze from her, his mind a maelstrom of self-recrimination and despair. Every attempt he made to speak, to apologize, to simply break the suffocating silence, was met with a chilling, unwavering stonewall. Her hurt, so profound and raw, was a tangible presence in the luxurious cabin, a barrier more impenetrable than any physical wall. He knew he deserved her contempt. He had played a cruel, calculated game, driven by years of festering resentment, and in his blindness, he had wounded the very person he had, against all odds, come to cherish. The irony was a bitter, nauseating taste in his mouth. He had intended to inflict pain on Victor Cruz through his daughter, but the pain he had caused Isabella, and now felt himself, was far more devastating than any revenge could ever have been. His meticulously constructed plan had backfired spectacularly, leaving him with an empty victory and a shattered heart. Upon landing at the private hangar, Isabella exited the jet with a swift, almost frantic urgency, her movements precise and unyielding. She hailed a taxi, ignoring Damon's desperate pleas, her gaze fixed straight ahead, as if he no longer existed. He watched her drive away, the sleek black car disappearing into the bustling city traffic, taking with it the last fragile vestiges of his hope. The emptiness that settled in his chest was a vast, desolate void, more crushing than any financial ruin. The following days were a blur of frantic, futile attempts to contact her. His calls went unanswered. His emails remained unread. He sent flowers, heartfelt letters, anything he could think of, but they were either returned unopened or simply vanished into the abyss of her silence. He even tried visiting her family home, a sprawling, imposing estate he remembered from newspaper articles, but the gates remained stubbornly closed, a silent, unyielding fortress. He knew Victor Cruz would be alerted to his presence, and that would only complicate matters further. Damon's empire, usually his sole focus, now felt hollow, meaningless. The gleaming towers of his success seemed to mock him, monuments to a victory that tasted like ash. He paced his penthouse, a restless, tormented soul, haunted by Isabella's hurt, her furious condemnation, her profound, justifiable betrayal. He had never experienced such a deep, pervasive sense of loss, a pain that transcended the bitterness of his past. He knew he had to face Victor Cruz. It was the only way, perhaps, to clear the air, to somehow gain a measure of understanding, and maybe, just maybe, to open a path back to Isabella. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but he had nothing left to lose. He arranged a meeting through his legal team, a formal request for a business discussion, carefully omitting any personal agenda. Victor Cruz, known for his ruthless pragmatism, eventually agreed, likely intrigued by the notion of a direct encounter with the man who had resurrected his family's name from the ashes. The meeting took place in a sterile, opulent boardroom high above the city, a space that radiated power and unyielding authority. Victor Cruz, older now, his hair flecked with silver, but his eyes still sharp and calculating, regarded Damon with an impassive, almost disdainful gaze. He was a formidable man, radiating an aura of unwavering control. "Mr. Stone," Victor began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, cutting through the silence. "To what do I owe the unexpected pleasure? I understand you've recently acquired a significant interest in a rival tech firm. Perhaps a merger proposition?" His tone was laced with a subtle challenge, a hint of his familiar predatory nature. Damon ignored the bait, his gaze steady, unwavering. "I'm not here to discuss business, Mr. Cruz. I'm here to discuss your daughter, Isabella, and the past." Victor's expression hardened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his features. "My daughter's affairs are her own, and the past, Mr. Stone, is just that, past. I suggest we focus on the present and potential opportunities. The past, Mr. Cruz, is never truly past until it's reconciled," Damon countered, his voice firm, imbued with a quiet intensity. "Your actions, over a decade ago, in destroying my family's company, had profound consequences. My father, he never recovered. He died a broken man." The words, spoken aloud after so many years, carried a raw, aching truth. Victor's face remained impassive, betraying no emotion. "Business is business, Mr. Stone. There are winners and losers. Your father was a good man, but perhaps ill-equipped for the cutthroat nature of the market. I simply saw an opportunity and I seized it. It's the way of the world." His voice was devoid of remorse, a cold, unyielding pragmatism that chilled Damon to the bone. "Opportunity?" Damon scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You call destroying lives, shattering legacies, opportunity? You left my family destitute, scattered, and now you've allowed your daughter to be caught in the crossfire of my retribution." He looked directly into Victor's eyes, demanding a reaction. "She knows, Mr. Cruz. She knows why I bid for her at the auction. She knows I used her for revenge. A muscle twitched in Victor's jaw, the only outward sign of his internal reaction. He remained silent for a long moment, his gaze unwavering, assessing. "And what precisely do you want, Mr. Stone? An apology? Compensation? A declaration of war?" "I want Isabella back," Damon stated, his voice raw with a desperate sincerity. "And I want you to understand the depth of the pain your actions caused, not just for my family, but now for your own daughter. She is nothing like you, Mr. Cruz. She's kind, she's compassionate, and she's hurting because of your legacy and my misguided attempt at revenge." Victor finally broke eye contact, turning to stare out the towering window, his back to Damon. "Isabella is different," he conceded, his voice almost a whisper, a rare moment of vulnerability from the ruthless titan. "She sees the world with a different lens. She reminds me of her mother. She was also too gentle for this world." A flicker of something akin to regret, a fleeting shadow of a long-buried sorrow, crossed his face. "She deserves better than to be a pawn in your old battles, or mine," Damon pressed, seizing the faint glimmer of emotion. "I came to you because I believe that if she hears it from you, if you acknowledge the past, perhaps she can begin to understand, to forgive, to see that my feelings for her, though born from a dark place, are now undeniably real." Victor turned back, his gaze still guarded, but a subtle shift in his demeanor. "You love her, do you, Mr. Stone?" There was a hint of curiosity, perhaps even a grudging respect, in his tone. "More than anything," Damon admitted, the words heavy with a profound truth. "I made a terrible mistake. I blinded myself with hatred. And now I stand to lose the only woman who has ever truly mattered to me. I'm asking for your help, Mr. Cruz. Not for business, not for revenge. For Isabella." Victor considered him for a long moment, his sharp mind undoubtedly weighing the implications, the potential benefits, the public perception. A softening, almost imperceptible, touched the corners of his eyes. "Isabella, she values integrity above all else. She despises dishonesty, manipulation." He paused, then continued, his voice low. "I will speak with her. I cannot promise you her forgiveness, Mr. Stone. That is entirely up to her. But I will tell her what I know. And I will acknowledge my past. For her." A fragile flicker of hope ignited in Damon's chest. It wasn't a guarantee, not by a long shot. But it was a start. It was a lifeline in the desolate ocean of his regret. He had taken a step towards atonement, a path he had never envisioned. The journey of revenge had twisted and turned, leading him to a desperate plea for love. And the first, terrifying step towards redemption. Chapter 6. A father's confession and a daughter's pain. The opulent living room of the Cruz estate, usually a hub of quiet elegance, was steeped in a heavy, fragile silence. Isabella sat on a plush sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on her father, Victor Cruz. He sat opposite her, his usually formidable posture subtly softened, his expression uncharacteristically subdued. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a silent acknowledgement of the difficult conversation that was about to unfold. Victor had called her to his study the previous evening, his voice unusually gentle, requesting her presence at home for an important discussion. Isabella, still reeling from Damon's devastating confession, had arrived with a mixture of apprehension and a lingering sense of profound hurt. She had spent the last few days in a fog of disbelief and pain, the idyllic memories of the island twisted into a cruel mockery, tainted by the bitter truth of Damon's calculated deception. "Isabella, my dear," Victor began, his voice low, laced with a rare tenderness that surprised her. "There's something I need to tell you, something about the past, about Damon Stone." Isabella flinched at the name, her heart giving a painful lurch. "I already know, Father," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He told me. He bought me for revenge because you ruined his family." The words tasted like ash on her tongue, bitter and devastating. Victor sighed, a deep, weary sound. He leaned forward, his gaze direct, earnest. "Yes, he told me as well. And what he told you is true. I did orchestrate the takeover of Stone Manufacturing years ago. It was a hostile acquisition. Ruthless. It left the Stone family in financial ruin. His father, Arthur Stone, was a proud man. He never recovered." Isabella stared at him, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She had always known her father was a formidable, even ruthless businessman. But this was a direct, personal confirmation of a destructive act, a brutal acknowledgement of the lives he had shattered. The casual way he had dismissed the human cost chilled her. "Why, father?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why did you never tell me?" Victor's gaze drifted, a fleeting shadow of something unreadable crossing his face. "It was business, Isabella, the way of the world, survival of the fittest. I saw an opportunity, a weakness, and I exploited it. It's how empires are built. I didn't see the need to burden you with the unpleasantries of my business dealings." His tone was devoid of genuine remorse, but tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible wistfulness. "Unpleasantries?" Isabella's voice rose, laced with a sudden, fierce anger. "You destroyed a family, father. You shattered lives. That's not unpleasantries. That's utter devastation." She felt a surge of rage, not just at Damon, but at her father, at the callousness with which he spoke of such profound human suffering. Victor looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes at her outburst. "I suppose, from a personal perspective, yes. But in the world of commerce, it's simply strategy." He paused, then continued, his voice softer. "Damon Stone. He has rebuilt his empire with remarkable speed and ferocity. He is, in many ways, a formidable opponent, a man driven by a powerful sense of purpose." He spoke almost with grudging admiration. "And that purpose was to hurt you, father?" Isabella retorted, her voice trembling. "Through me. He used me. He manipulated me. And he managed to make me believe he actually cared." The sting of betrayal was still fresh, raw, agonizing. Victor nodded slowly. "He told me he fell in love with you, Isabella. He seemed genuinely distraught at the prospect of losing you. He came to me, not for revenge, but to ask for my help in gaining your forgiveness. He claimed his feelings for you are real, that they changed his perspective." Isabella scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound. "And you believed him? After everything? He's a manipulator. Just like you, father. He used my passion for charity, my vulnerability, against me. He lied to me for days, pretended to be someone he's not." The thought of Damon's confession of love now seemed like a cruel joke, a further layer of his intricate deception. "Isabella," Victor said, his voice surprisingly firm, "I will not defend Damon Stone's actions. What he did was wrong, manipulative. But I have seen many men, ruthless men, change when confronted with genuine emotion, with unexpected compassion. He came to me, a man he despises, and asked for my help. That is not the action of a man solely driven by revenge. That is the action of a man desperate for something more." He paused, then continued, his gaze holding hers, a rare moment of profound honesty in his eyes. "And I regret the pain my actions caused, Isabella. Not just to the Stone family, but now, to you. I see the world in a different way than you do. I always have. But I value your happiness above all else. If Damon Stone truly makes you happy, despite his egregious error, then perhaps it is worth considering." Isabella stared at him, stunned. Her father, the impenetrable titan of industry, admitting regret, expressing concern for her happiness, hinting at a softening of his rigid worldview. It was unprecedented. It was a testament, perhaps, to the profound impact Damon's confession had made, not just on her, but on the man who had inadvertently set this devastating chain of events in motion. But the pain, the betrayal, remained. Her heart ached with a deep, pervasive sorrow. How could she trust him again? How could she reconcile the kind, intelligent, unexpectedly vulnerable man she had glimpsed on the island with the calculating, vengeful figure who had deliberately set out to hurt her? The wounds were too fresh, the deception too profound. "I need time, Father," she said, her voice raw, imbued with a profound weariness. "I need time to think, to process, to understand." She rose, her body aching with an emotional fatigue that went to her very bones. "Thank you for telling me the truth, even if it's a truth I wish I never knew." She turned and left the room, leaving her father sitting alone in the quiet elegance of his living room, a man grappling with the subtle, unexpected consequences of his own ruthless ambition. Isabella walked through the familiar halls of her childhood home, the grandeur now feeling suffocating, the silence echoing with the clamor of her shattered beliefs. World, once clearly delineated by right and wrong, was now a confusing tapestry of shades of gray, tangled by deception, betrayal, and an unwelcome, confusing tenderness. The love she had unknowingly begun to feel for Damon was a dangerous, volatile emotion, a beautiful lie that threatened to consume her. She had to untangle it, to find her own truth amidst the wreckage, and in that moment, she wasn't sure if she ever could. Chapter 7. A chance encounter and lingering doubts. Days turned into a week, then 2. Isabella retreated into herself, immersing herself in her charity work, pouring her energy into rebuilding the old schoolhouse, finding solace in the tangible act of creation and the genuine gratitude of the children she helped. She avoided all social events, all reminders of the world Damon inhabited, carefully constructing a new, protective shell around her fragile heart. The memory of his confession, "I fell in love with you," resonated with a haunting persistence, a beautiful lie she desperately wanted to believe, but dared not. Damon, frustrated by her continued silence, haunted by her absence, grew desperate. He had exhausted every conventional means of reaching her. He knew he was running out of time, that her silence would only harden into an impenetrable wall. He needed to see her, to speak to her, to somehow convince her of the agonizing sincerity of his regret, of the profound truth of his feelings. He learned through discreet channels that Isabella was dedicating most of her time to the school rebuilding project. Decided to visit the site, knowing it was a risky move, but one he felt compelled to take. He arrived in a nondescript car, leaving his usual entourage behind, dressing casually to blend in with the workers and volunteers. The site was bustling with activity, the air filled with the sounds of hammering, sawing, and cheerful chatter. Children, their faces bright with excitement, ran through the half-finished corridors, their laughter a joyful antidote to the lingering bitterness in Damon's soul. He spotted her immediately. Isabella, dressed in practical work clothes, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail, was kneeling on the ground, patiently explaining something to a small group of children, demonstrating how to carefully place a brick. Her face was smudged with dust, a streak of paint across her cheek, but her eyes shone with a quiet happiness he hadn't seen on the island. She looked utterly at peace, genuinely fulfilled, and utterly beautiful. Damon approached slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a profound sense of inadequacy, of shame. He, the ruthless billionaire, the man who built empires from code and concrete, felt utterly powerless in the face of her quiet strength, her unwavering dedication to a cause so pure. Isabella looked up, sensing Buckshin, his presence. Her eyes, initially wide with surprise, quickly hardened. a flicker of the pain he had inflicted returning to their depths. She rose slowly, brushing dust from her pants, her expression carefully neutral. "Damon," she said, her voice flat, devoid of warmth. It was the first time she had spoken to him since the island. The sound of his name on her lips, cold and distant, twisted his gut. "Isabella," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "I know you don't want to see me, but I had to come. I had to speak to you." She crossed her arms, her stance defensive. "There's nothing more to say. You've made your intentions perfectly clear. You bought me for revenge. The rest was a lie." "It wasn't a lie," Damon insisted, his voice raw with desperation. "Not all of it. The revenge, yes, that was my initial intent. My blindness, my hatred. But everything else, Isabella, everything I felt for you on that island, every conversation, every moment, that was real. It changed me. You changed me." Isabella scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Changed you? Damon, you're a billionaire. You're powerful. You think a few days on an island can erase years of ingrained bitterness and a thirst for vengeance? You think a confession of love can magically undo the profound pain of betrayal?" Her voice cracked, revealing the raw womb beneath her controlled facade. "I know it can't," Damon conceded, his voice quiet, filled with deep remorse. "I know I hurt you terribly, and I deserve your anger, your distrust. But I swear to you, Isabella, my feelings for you are genuine. They are the only true thing that came out of that twisted plan. I hated the man who destroyed my family. I sought to hurt him through you. But instead, I found myself falling for the woman you truly are. Not the daughter of Victor Cruz, but Isabella. Kind, compassionate, intelligent, selfless Isabella." He looked at her, his eyes pleading, laid bare, stripped of all artifice. "I love you, Isabella." She turned away, her shoulders trembling, the weight of his words, of her own conflicted emotions, pressing down on her. "How can I trust you, Damon? Every interaction we had, every kind word, every shared moment was built on a foundation of deceit. How can I ever believe anything you say now?" "You don't have to," Damon said, his voice surprisingly firm. "Not right now. I don't ask for your forgiveness today. I only ask for a chance to prove myself, to earn back a fraction of the trust I so carelessly destroyed. Let me help with the school. Not with money, not with a grand gesture. Let me work alongside you. Let me show you, through action, that I am not the man I was, that I genuinely care about the things you care about." Isabella slowly turned back to him, her eyes, though still clouded with pain, holding a flicker of something new, something akin to reluctant curiosity. "You want to work here? At the school?" Her voice was laced with disbelief. "Yes," Damon affirmed, his gaze unwavering. "I'm a builder, Isabella. I build structures. Let me help you build this school. Let me show you that I can contribute, that I can be trusted, that my intentions are genuinely selfless, at least where you and your causes are concerned. I'll do anything. Just don't shut me out completely." His desperation, raw and palpable, was evident in his plea. Isabella studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his, trying to discern the sincerity beneath the layers of his past deception. She saw the genuine pain in his gaze, the profound regret, the desperate longing for a chance at redemption. It was a stark contrast to the calculating man who had purchased her for revenge. She saw the true Damon, the man who had been, however briefly, disarmed by her presence. On that island. "I don't know, Damon," she finally said, her voice still trembling but less resolute than before. "The pain, it's still so fresh." "I understand," he replied, his voice gentle, understanding. "But please, consider it. I'll stay out of your way. I'll simply work. No grand pronouncements, no expectations. Just a chance to show you, through my actions, who I truly am now. I am willing to wait, for as long as it takes, for a glimmer of hope that one day you might consider forgiving me. I can't live without that hope, Isabella. Not anymore. His vulnerability, his willingness to humble himself, to plead for something beyond his vast wealth and power, was a new, unexpected facet of Damon Stone. It chipped away at Isabella's anger, reaching a deeper well of emotion she hadn't realized was still accessible. The thought of him, the powerful billionaire, working with his hands, sweating alongside the volunteers, for no other reason than to prove himself to her, was a powerful, almost irresistible proposition. It was a chance, however slim, to see if the man she had glimpsed on the island, the man she had surprisingly, tragically, begun to fall for, was truly real. The path to forgiveness was long, arduous, and fraught with lingering doubts. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was a path worth taking. She still held all the power, the choice firmly in her hands. And that, realized, was a crucial, empowering truth. Chapter 8. A new kind of builder, the sight of Damon Stone, dressed in faded jeans and a simple t-shirt, wielding a hammer with unexpected competence, became a surprisingly common sight at the school construction site. Isabella had, after days of agonizing deliberation, cautiously agreed to his proposition, setting strict boundaries. No personal conversations, no attempts at reconciliation, simply work. She had expected him to last a day, maybe two, before his pride, or his executive duties, called him away. But Damon proved her wrong. He arrived promptly each morning, sometimes before the other volunteers, and worked tirelessly, silently. He didn't issue commands or flaunt his wealth. He learned from the BOF, seasoned carpenters and masons. His keen intellect quickly grasping the intricacies of construction. He hauled lumber, mixed mortar, painted walls. His hands, once accustomed to abstract data and power negotiations, now calloused and stained with grime. He even brought sophisticated yet practical solutions to structural challenges, his engineering mind finding elegant solutions to complex problems, saving the charity valuable time and resources. He was a builder in a new, more profound sense. Isabella watched him, often from a distance, her gaze a complex mixture of lingering suspicion and growing fascination. She saw him interact with the children, patiently explaining simple physics principles, helping them draw straight lines, his eyes softening with a genuine tenderness she had never imagined possible. He was surprisingly good with them, his usual intensity tempered by a gentle, almost paternal patience. He even brought in some of his tech expertise, helping to set up a small computer lab with donated, refurbished equipment, teaching the older students basic coding, igniting sparks of curiosity and ambition in their young minds. The other volunteers, initially awed by his presence, then confused by his uncharacteristic humility, slowly came to accept him. His earnestness, his dedication, his genuine hard work earned their quiet respect. They knew he was a billionaire, but he acted like one of them, a man simply committed to the task at hand. Still, Isabella kept her distance. Their interactions were strictly professional, limited to discussions about construction progress, material procurement, and the budget. She acknowledged his contributions with a polite nod, a terse "thank you," but never allowed her guard to fully drop. The wound of his betrayal was still too deep, too painful. She couldn't forget the calculated deception, the initial cruel intent. One afternoon, a torrential rainstorm hit unexpectedly, turning the construction site into a muddy quagmire. Damon, soaked to the bone, was tirelessly working to secure a tarp over newly laid bricks, his movements swift and efficient. A piece of scaffolding, loosened by the wind, suddenly swayed precariously, threatening to collapse on a small group of children who were huddled under a makeshift shelter nearby. Without a moment's hesitation, Damon lunged forward, pushing the children out of harm's way. A split second before the heavy metal structure crashed to the ground with a sickening clang. He rolled, landing hard in the mud, a sharp cry of pain escaping his lips. Isabella, who had witnessed the terrifying scene, rushed to boss him, her heart pounding with fear and a sudden, overwhelming surge of concern. "Damon, are you all right?" she cried, kneeling beside him, her hands instinctively reaching for him. He pushed himself up, wincing, his arm cradled awkwardly to his chest. "Just a sprain, I think," he grunted, his face pale, but his eyes scanning the children, making sure they were safe. "Are the children okay?" "They're fine, thanks to you," Isabella said, her voice trembling. She saw the relief flood his features, saw the genuine concern in his eyes. He hadn't thought of himself. He had only thought of the children. It was a selfless act, an instinctive, undeniable act of heroism, utterly devoid of any pretense or calculation. She helped him to his feet, her touch lingering, a warmth spreading through her fingertips despite the rain and the cold. The protective barrier around her heart, carefully constructed over weeks, fractured, revealing the raw, undeniable emotions beneath. In that single, selfless act, she saw the true Damon, the man who had been willing to sacrifice his own safety for the innocent. "We need to get you to a doctor," she insisted, her voice softer than she intended, her eyes filled with a dawning realization. He met her gaze, his eyes holding a profound vulnerability, a silent plea. "Isabella, Isabella began, his voice low. "Do you see now? Do you see that I'm trying? That I'm truly changing? That my love for you isn't a lie?" The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken questions, with lingering doubts, but the sincerity in his eyes, the undeniable evidence of his selfless act, resonated deep within her. The anger, though still present, was now tempered by a confusing, yet undeniable, surge of tenderness. She saw not just the man who had betrayed her, but the man who was desperately, painstakingly, working to redeem himself, who was willing to humble himself, to suffer, for a chance at her forgiveness. "Come on," she said, her voice still a little shaky, but filled with a new, hesitant warmth. "Let's get you cleaned up. And then we'll talk. Really talk." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, a fragile, tentative, but undeniably real beginning. The impenetrable wall around her heart had finally, irrevocably, started to crumble, and Damon, battered and bruised, but filled with a surge of renewed hope, knew that this was the most meaningful victory he had ever achieved. Chapter 9. The slow path to redemption. The doctor confirmed a severe sprain to Damon's arm, requiring a sling and a period of rest. Yet, despite the pain, a quiet relief settled over him. Isabella had stayed with him, insisting on driving him to the clinic, her touch gentle, her concern palpable. It was the longest, most unguarded interaction they had shared since the island, a fragile bridge slowly being rebuilt. As she drove him back to the school site to collect his belongings, the rain had subsided, leaving the air fresh and clean. The world seemed to shimmer with a renewed clarity. "I still don't fully understand, Damon," Isabella said, her voice thoughtful, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Why did you truly pursue revenge after all these years? What made you hold on to it so fiercely?" Damon sighed, a deep, weary sound. "When Victor destroyed my family, it wasn't just about losing money, Isabella. It was about seeing my father, a man I idolized, utterly broken. He was a man of immense pride, and to see that pride, that spirit, crushed, it left a deep scar, I was a boy then, helpless. I vowed I would never be helpless again. I built my empire, piece by piece, fueled by that vow, by the burning need to reclaim what was taken, to prove that the Stones would not be defeated. Revenge became my sole purpose, my driving force. He paused, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. I believed it was the only way to heal, to find peace. And did it? Isabella asked softly, her eyes studying his profile. Damon's lips curved into a faint, self-deprecating smile. No, it became a cage. It consumed me. I pushed everyone away. I lived for work, for acquiring more power, more wealth, believing it would fill the void. But it didn't. It just made me lonelier. He glanced at her, his eyes holding a profound vulnerability. Until you, with your kindness, your genuine passion, you showed me a different path. A different way to live. A way that isn't dictated by bitterness and the past. Isabella remained silent for a long moment, processing his confession. The raw honesty in his voice, the glimpse into the depths of his past pain, resonated deeply within her. She understood, in a way she hadn't before, the driving force behind his actions, even if she couldn't condone them. She saw not just the ruthless billionaire, but the scarred boy, consumed by a generational trauma. I still don't condone what you did, Damon, she finally said, her voice firm, yet softer than before. Using me, manipulating me. That was unforgivable. It caused me immense pain. And trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to mend. I know, Damon replied, his voice quiet, filled with remorse. And I don't expect you to forgive me easily or quickly. I will work for it, Isabella. For as long as it takes, I will show you, through my actions, not just my words, that I am worthy of your trust, of your regard. I want to be a better man, for you, for us. They arrived back at the school. Damon, despite his injury, insisted on helping with the cleanup, albeit with one arm. Isabella found herself working alongside him, their movements now more synchronized, a comfortable rhythm developing between them. She even found herself laughing occasionally at his dry wit, at his clumsy attempts to perform tasks with one hand. The tension between them, though not entirely gone, had softened, replaced by a tentative, fragile camaraderie. Over the next few weeks, Damon remained a constant, dedicated presence at the school. He continued to offer his expertise, his time, and his physical labor. Genuinely committed to the project, he quietly arranged for additional, anonymous donations of materials and equipment, streamlining the construction process and allowing the school to open its doors ahead of schedule. He never spoke of his family's past, never pressured Isabella for forgiveness, simply allowed his actions to speak for themselves. Isabella, in turn, slowly, tentatively, began to let down her guard. She invited him to shared lunches with the other volunteers, included him in discussions about the school's curriculum, and even, on occasion, found herself seeking his opinion on matters unrelated to construction. She saw the genuine change in him, the dedication, the quiet selflessness that had replaced his former intensity. He was no longer just the man who had hurt her. He was also the man who had selflessly saved children, who was diligently working to redeem himself, who was striving to be a better person. One evening, after a particularly long day at the school, they found themselves alone in the nearly finished main classroom, the scent of fresh paint and new wood filling the air. Dusk settled outside, casting long, gentle shadows through the large windows. "The school is beautiful, Damon," Isabella said softly, her gaze sweeping over the vibrant walls, the rows of brand-new desks. "It's more than I ever imagined. Thank you. Truly." Damon turned to her, his good hand reaching out, gently touching her cheek. His eyes, warm and tender, held a profound sincerity. "It's because of you, Isabella. You inspired it. You inspire me." Isabella leaned into his touch, her eyes searching his, seeing no trace of deception, only raw, genuine emotion. The pain of his betrayal was still a faint echo, a lingering scar, but it no longer consumed her. It was overshadowed by the growing warmth in her heart, by the undeniable truth of his consistent actions, by the quiet, powerful love that had blossomed between them against all odds. "I think I can forgive you, Damon," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, the words a profound emotional release. "It won't be easy, and it won't be forgotten. But I see your remorse. I see your change. And I—" She paused, her gaze holding his. "I believe you. I believe you love me." A profound wave of relief washed over Damon, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He pulled her gently into his uninjured arm, holding her close, pressing his cheek against her hair. The long journey, the painful path to redemption, had finally, miraculously, led him here, to her embrace. "Thank you, Isabella," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing past my mistakes. Thank you for giving me a chance." She pulled back slightly, her gaze unwavering. "But this is just the beginning, Damon. Trust is built, brick by painstaking brick. And it takes time. Are you willing to truly build it with me? Not just with words, but with unwavering honesty, with complete transparency, and with a shared commitment to a future that leaves the past behind?" He looked into her eyes, seeing the challenge, the hope, and the deep, abiding love that mirrored his own. "Every single brick, Isabella," he promised, his voice firm, resolute, "for as long as it takes. My future, my true life, starts now, with you." He leaned in, his lips gently finding hers, a soft, tender kiss that sealed not a transaction, but a fragile, profoundly hopeful promise of a love redeemed. The bitterness of revenge had finally, irrevocably, dissolved, replaced by the sweet, intoxicating taste of a love he never expected to find, a love that had transformed him from a man consumed by the past into a man building a future, hand in hand with the only woman who truly mattered.